Here's the Healing the Child Within book. I'm going to read it, and it's probably going to be pretty quick. This is Chapter 2. Yesterday was a questionnaire on whether this book is worth reading. So you can listen to that here if I put the thing there. Chapter 2. Background of the concept of the child within. References to the concept of this book is 1984. Written in 1984. References to the concept of the child within originated as far back as the time of Christ. But three recent developments are important in its current concept: child abuse and neglect. The first development comes out of two movements. One is the child abuse movement. The other is an offshoot of an interaction of this with certain clinicians and writers in the psychotherapy field. These concepts have evolved over the past 50 years, perhaps coincidentally with the same time frame of the second major movement of the child within. The second major development includes the 12-step self-help recovery movement and the closely aligned alcohol and the family treatment movement. This may surprise people who are not familiar with all three of these areas, but child abuse, psychotherapy, and alcoholism recovery. Yet there are definite indirect connection with each making important contributions. This book's from 1984. Alcoholism recovery. Successful alcoholism recovery began in 1935 with the founding of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. In addition to suffering from illness of alcoholism, most founders of AA were either adult children of alcoholics or were mistreated, abused as children. Many had unsuccessfully tried various forms of psychotherapy. Unfortunately, even today, outside of the field of alcoholism treatment, individual psychotherapy and alcoholics and their family members early in recovery has not substantially improved. Like psychotherapy, the field of child abuse and neglect is only beginning to discover the vast clinical skills and effectiveness available in the field of alcoholism and other chemical dependence and codependence, defined on page 29. We're on page 6. In turn, the alcoholism field is learning more and more from psychotherapy with child abuse and neglect. During its first 20 years, Alcoholics Anonymous grew rapidly. It became firmly established as the treatment for alcoholism. That's according to Kurtz in 1979, for what it's worth. In its 12 steps of recovery were a revelation for the heretofore misunderstood and mistreated alcoholic. In the mid-1950s, both the generic family therapy movement and the Fellowship of Al-Anon, which is in the mid-1950s, both the generic family therapy movement and the Fellowship of Al-Anon, which is for the family and friends of alcoholics, came into being. But the children of alcoholic families were given little attention, especially the child within of all affected. Until the late 1960s, essentially no articles or books seriously addressed the concern for children from alcoholic families. The first book, The Forgotten Children, by Margaret Cork, was published in 1969. With that, the literature and attention gradually increased. The family and children. During the 1970s and 80s, practical approaches to understanding and helping family members of alcoholics and other chemical-dependent people soon emerged. The field was specializing in this area. The founding in 1983 of the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, NACOA, encouraged networking and the dissemination of information. At the same time, the first self-help groups for adult children of alcoholics began to meet. Today, these ACA or ACOA groups are growing so fast that an estimated one new group starts in the USA every day. During these last few decades and years, the concepts of child within reemerged and began to mature, both the alcoholism family field and in that of psychotherapy. The involvement of psychotherapy and the child within. New heading. The involvement of psychotherapy and the child within concept began with the discovery of the human unconscious, followed by Freud's trauma theory. However, Freud quickly discovered the latter for one less clinically effective in healing childhood trauma wound, the drive or instinct theory, and the Oedipal complex. While many of Freud's brightest and most creative students and colleagues, such as Jung, Adler, Rank, and Assagioli, disagreed with Freud's latter two theories and made their own valuable contributions to the field of psychotherapy, the concept of the child within, the real or true self, came slowly. So I think that it's important to note that the child within is the real or true self that is suppressed through whatever it is, behaviors that you learn to cope with internal distress. The child within is the true self that is oftentimes shrouded by learned behaviors, coping behaviors for trauma that occurred in childhood. That is what I'm understanding from the first 7 pages of this book. Contributions by Erickson, Klein, Horney, Sullivan, Fairbairn, Hartman, Jacobson, and others paved the way for London pediatric Donald Winnicott to describe his observations of mothers, infants, and children. These included specifics about the real or true self, which is our child within, and which is crucial in our lives and to the feeling alive. It's crucial to our lives and to feeling alive. Drawing from the psychoanalytic psychotherapy literature, especially from Freud and Winnicott, from observations of her parents and from reading works on child abuse. In 1979, Alice Miller began interrogating child mistreatment, abuse, and neglect, the psychoanalytic psychotherapy. In her 3 books, however, only twice does she make important connections of alcoholism as a major parental condition predisposing damage to the child within. This despite the fact that many of her patients and those of her psychoanalytic colleagues were probably children of alcoholics and codependents. In no way do I fault her, for I believe that she has had the same incomplete education that I and most helping professionals have had, i.e., in essentially no training in alcoholism and codependence as preliminary illnesses. Again, this book was written in 1984. In fact, our training has actually been negative about these 2 common clinical conditions. Medical illness. New heading. Another contribution to healing the child within came from using group psychotherapy and guided imagery as treatment aid for cancer patients. Discovery that many cancer patients had neglected getting their needs met and expressing their feelings. Matthews, Simonton, and others described approaches to remedying these needs. Others in the field of medicine are beginning to use similar approaches in treating heart disease and other life-threatening conditions. Dorsey, Moss, Siegel. I believe that the principles of these techniques in healing our child within can have important and useful applications in helping to ameliorate all illness and suffering. The final area that connects those above with the child within is that of spirituality. The alcoholism and alcoholism family fields use this recovery aid effectively. Some psychotherapists and physicians are beginning to recognize its value. Wilbur, Whitfield, Wegscheider, Cruz, Kunz, Moss, Siegel, Vaughn, Bowen, Gravitz. I refer to spirituality, not organized religion, throughout this book, especially in chapter 15. So this is not a book that is specifically about a religion, which is misleading from the first sentence of this chapter, which is saying Christ, indicating this is going to have a Christian bent to it. But he says, and I repeat, I refer to spirituality, not organized religion, throughout this book, especially in chapter 15. As I wrote in Alcoholism and Spirituality, I believe that spirituality is crucial in achieving full recovery from any medical or psychological condition, and especially for discovering and ultimately liberating the child within, or real or true self. Just what is our child within? How do we know it when we see it, feel it, or recognize it within our spirits? What relevance does it have to recovery from above-mentioned conditions, as well as from other physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual illnesses? That's it. See you tomorrow. Chapter 3. Well, chapter 3 tomorrow. Goodbye.